The economy is sending two completely opposite signals right now. On one hand, experts are warning that AI could replace millions of jobs within the next few years. On the other hand, unemployment remains surprisingly low. Meanwhile, the US has just banned a Chinese linked EV company from selling cars because chip companies are spending billions to cater bigger, and Meta is facing a lawsuit that raises questions about the power of big tech. At first glance, these look unrelated stories, but they are not. Together, they reveal where the global economy is heading next. So let's start with the bigger story. A new bipartisan nonprofit called Raise US has launched with more than $500 million in funding to help workers adapt to the AI driven job disruption. The organization is backed by former government officials and major companies, including Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, and Bank of America. Why now? Because predictions from the major firms suggest that AI could automate or significantly challenge up to 25 million American jobs within the next 5 years. So the concern is that every job disappears, and the concern is that many jobs changes faster than the workers can adapt. You should care because this isn't just a tech industry issue. AI is increasingly being used in customer service, finance, software development, marketing, logistics, and administrative works. Many white collar jobs that once seemed safe are now being affected. So, what happens next? Expect the governments, companies, and universities to invest heavily in retraining programs as AI adoption accelerates. And that brings us to an interesting contradiction. If AI is supposedly coming for jobs, then why does the labor market still look surprisingly strong? That's exactly what our second story is about. New US labor data shows jobless claims fell to 215K lower than the economics expected. Layoffs remain relatively low despite the economic uncertainty. Why now? Because businesses are facing higher costs, geopolitical tensions, and rapid technological change. Yet many companies still cannot find enough skilled workers. You should care because labor market strength remains one of the most important indicators of economic health, and strong employment supports consumer spending, which drives much of the economy. So, what happens next? The big question is whether AI driven productivity gains eventually reduce hiring demand, because right now the labor market is providing more resilient than expected. But the real story may be that we are seeing a transition period rather than a collapse. And while workers are adapting to AI, governments are dealing with another challenge, technology scrutiny. Because the next story isn't really about electric vehicles, it's about the growing technology rivalry between the world's two largest economies. The US has denied authorization for Chinese linked EV maker Polestar to sell new vehicles in America's beginning with future model years. The decision stems from the concerns over connected vehicle software and national security. Why now? Because modern vehicles collect enormous amount of data through cameras, sensors, GPS systems, and internet connectivity. And governments increasingly view connected cars as technology platforms rather than simply transportation products. You should care because the this signals that the US-China technology competition is expanding beyond semiconductors into consumer products. And cars are becoming computers on wheels, and governments are treating them that way. So, what happens next? Expect more restrictions involving connected technologies, data security, and critical infrastructure. So, the era of complete globalized technology markets appears to be fading, and that leads directly to our next story. ON Semiconductor is acquiring Synaptics in a deal worth valued at roughly $7 billion. Why now? Because semiconductor industry is becoming increasingly important because chips power AI systems, electric vehicles, data centers, and many more things. So companies want scale, intellectual property, and access to the high growth markets. You should care because nearly every major technology trend depends on semiconductors, and the companies controlling critical chips will have enormous influence over the future economy. Expect more consolidation across AI, infrastructure, semiconductor manufacturing, and advanced computing. These things can happen next, and the race to build the next generation of technology is accelerating. And that race is creating new tensions inside some of the world's largest tech companies. Which brings us to the final story, a story that highlights the growing scrutiny facing big tech. So Meta is facing a lawsuit from a former critic who alleges that the company attempted to silence her. Because why now? Because the big tech companies are facing increasing pressure from regulators, lawmakers, journalists, and former insiders. Questions around corporate influence, platform power, and accountability continue to grow. You should care because billions of people rely on larger technology platforms for communication, information, and businesses, and how these companies use their power to affect everyone. So, what happens next? Expect more legal challenges, more regulations, and greater public debate around the role of major technology platforms. So, the conclusion that we can draw from all of these five stories, a larger pattern will emerge. AI is changing work, workers are being forced to adapt, governments are treating technology as a national security issue, and corporations are consolidating to control critical technologies, and society is increasingly questioning how much power large tech companies should have. So, the biggest takeaway isn't that AI will destroy jobs or that a tech war is coming. It's that we are entering an economy where technology is no longer just an industry. Technology is becoming the foundation of labor markets, geopolitics, manufacturing, transportation, and even public debate. So, the winners of the next decade won't simply be the companies with the best technology. They will be the workers, businesses, and countries that adapt fastest to a world being rebuilt by technology. And the question is, will society adapt as quickly as the technology itself?